Hello guys. Today we will be doing a quick overview of full stack coffee shop project, uh, and we will talk about all the project requirements given by Udacity and all the front end code and setup and all those things what is required from your side. And also we will discuss about the auth 0 and the backend implementation for that, and what is being provided to you. And we will also discuss the starter code that has been given to you as uh, a kickstart so that you can build on top of that code. So, let's start with a quick overview of this project. Coffee shop project, it's just like a coffee shop that you visit in your daily routine. The basic scenario is the Udacity has built a coffee shop where they want the students to learn and drink coffee. What is required from your side is basically uh, they want you to build something or some interface in which anyone can see the available drinks at any time. So if a user visits your store, then he should be able to see all the available drinks on the menu, and like what is on the menu and what he can order. And with that, there are some rules like who can add those drinks and who can delete and like update those drinks. Yeah, there are like you have to create some REST APIs and some system risk and compliance principles. You have to manage authentication and authorization in Flask. So these are the basic, or you can say the fundamental things that you will be building in this project. So the main purpose of this project is to check your authentication or identity and access management skills. Okay. Uh, okay. First we are going to review the rubric requirements that are given to you by Udacity. Okay. First of all, they have given you the server setup. Okay. So you can go to their repository, just like described over here. So just go to their repository and clone the code. Okay, so the basic code is placed under projects folder and in over here. You can see there are two folders, the front end and the back end. We will discuss the both of these project, and I will explain what is expected from your side and what you actually have to do to complete this project. Okay. Okay, first of all, we will be discussing about the requirements of the front-end project. So let's talk about it. I think it's pretty easy to set up and run it as it is. Like it's already built-in project, like a starter code given to you, so you don't have to work on it. And you just focus on the implementation of your backend code and or your Flask code. So basically, it's an Angular app. So if you just clone this project from here, and like you are provided with some basic code. So if I go there, and you can see I have cloned this project, and you are given this whole code base as a starter code. If you talk about the setup and running of this project, then they have provided you all the required things, mm, which you can follow to run your application. There are some prerequisites which you need to install, and there are some errors that you may face while running this project. I will also explain those errors as well. So to install, first clone this project as I did over here. Just like And then to install all those dependencies, you need to run this command like npm install, and this will install all your packages. So before you run this command, just make sure your root directory is over here at this folder. You are under front end folder, so just make sure that. Okay, so otherwise it won't be able to find the packages.json and it will throw some errors. So to install all the dependencies, just run this command and it's gonna install all the required dependencies which are defined in your packages.json file. Okay, and after that, to run this application, you need the Ionic, and you can install the Ionic CLI tool from this link. Okay, so just install the Ionic. It's a npm tool. You can install it using this command, and then you can run this application using Ionic Serve. Okay, so these are all the things which are required to run the front end application. Okay, so and there is also an implementation of auth0 which you can set up in your environment.typescript file. So just provide so it is like configurable, so just provide your auth0 URL and the audience and your client ID, and it will be good to go. So these are all the things which are required from you to run up and run this front end application. Okay, so like there is nothing else required from your side. It's already a developed code, so I don't think you need to modify anything over here. So yeah, I guess this is like everything from the front end side, and yeah. So now if we talk about the backend code, then let's just review the requirements provided by Udacity. So you are given with a starter code, so you can start building your APIs on top of that code. So we will go through this code. So there are some following endpoints that you have to implement, and you have to implement the error handling as well, as like it's a best practice. And then you need to secure your REST APIs, like all the REST APIs. If a user is non-authenticated or unauthenticated person is accessing your API, then you should return with 404 or like 403 or unauthorized. So yeah, so you must have to secure your application with by implementing JWT and all the roles and actions and claims. So your project should be secure. Okay, so a custom for that purpose you are required with some function signatures that you have to follow. So let's just discuss all the backend requirements by visiting the code. Okay, so I have cloned this code from for the backend, and you can see the auth0 setup is required for your application to run, and for that purpose, again, you can like do or like copy and paste your auth0 domain over here, and then you can provide it with the API audience, which is also your API identification. So with just that, you can your application would be able to use auth0. So yeah, that is something. So these three things are required from your side to set up the auth0. Okay, so the very next thing which is required from you is to implement the require auth decorator, which is like in this file. If I show you, so if you see this decorator is you are provided with this with the signature of this requires auth and the basic implementation, but the functions which are described in this, or which are defined in this decorator, are yet to implement. So you can see there are some to-dos defined on top of each function. So let's just discuss each uh, task one by one. So first of all, you need to implement this get token header function, which will extract the token from the header, and you have to implement it. And then there is the main purpose of this function would be to get the token from your request header, and or else it will, if the token is not present, then it's going to throw some authentication error. Okay, so and the next function is the check permission. So for this application to work, you must have to implement roles and policies, or like user roles. So and you have to assign those permissions and roles to each user. Okay, so and you have to encode all these information into a JWT token. So whenever you receive a payload, so payload is your JWT token. So whenever you receive this payload, you have to check, or you have to check, or like if I say, you have to decode that JWT token and check if this JWT token requires all those permissions which are required to perform the specific action. Okay, so otherwise it's going to raise an authentication error if the permissions are not included in the payload. So and you should return this message. Okay, the very next method is verify decode JWT. So the main purpose of this function, it's going to check if the authentication or the main purpose of this function would be to decode the JWT token, and after that it's going to validate that token. Either it's a valid token or like it's not a valid token. So that would be the responsibility of this function. For more information, or like if you want to know about the certificates, then you can visit this link over here, and it's going to navigate you to the Stack Overflow question, where you can get the more details about the errors here. Okay, so the last thing that you need to do in this function is you are provided with the require auth decorator already. So if you implement all the above functions, then you are good to go. Okay, the very next thing which is required from you is to implement your backend APIs. So as you can see over here, you have these few APIs described over here. So as it's a coffee shop, and there are some roles as well. So there is a barista and there is a manager. So both of these roles has their own access, and the barista can only access the drinks and the drink detail, and it won't that role won't have any other action access. So and if the specified user is a manager, then he can also get the drinks and drink details. But with that, he can create new drinks, and he can also update and delete the existing drinks. So you have to implement these roles and their access management with their actions, or the API endpoints as well. So yeah, that's more about the from the backend side. So let me show you the backend code real quick. So you are given with the model file where the implementation for database and the model has already implemented. So your drink class has three attributes, the title and recipe, and there are some data representation functions that have already been defined, so you don't need to worry about that. So if you are required to represent data in some specific format, then just call that function. So that would be it. So let's just discuss about the API implementations which are required from your side. So we have kind of a CRUD operations which we have to implement. So first of all, there is a list of string. It's a get method which is going to give you a list of strings. Okay, so and the data representation for that endpoint would be in short format. So as I've explained earlier, this implementation has already been defined in the models class. So if everything is going to be okay, then just return with the 200 status code and with this JSON object, where the strings would be a list of strings. Okay, so you have to return all the strings. And the next thing would be a drink detail. So the user must have to access this API, the user must have a permission to this specific endpoint. So this is a secured endpoint, and the data representation would be in a long format. Okay, so and the result that it would return would be the same JSON object described over here. Okay, so it's going to return all the drinks, but this time it's going to return it with the detail in a detail format. Okay, so the next thing it's going to do, we are going to implement is basically a post method which is going to create a drink in your database. So if a manager is want to add a drink, then he should be able to do it using this endpoint. So and of course this endpoint is going to be secure endpoint. So and the format would be the drink.long format. Okay, so and it's going to return the same JSON object. Okay, and where the resulting array would also contain the newly created drink object. Okay, and in case of any error, you have to return with some reasonable status code. Okay, and the next thing is to update that update drinks. So if update requires an ID. So if a manager wants to update a specific drink, then he should be able to use to do so using this endpoint. So there are some limitations, or there are some checkpoints that you need to implement, or you need to keep in mind before while you are implementing this endpoint. So you must have to check if the ID which is being passed to this endpoint, if it exists. So if it doesn't exist, then you have to return the 404 status code. And but if it exists and the user has the permission to access this endpoint, then you should update the drink object. And the last thing is the delete endpoint. So and again for that you need to check two things: if the ID exists and the user has the permission to access this endpoint. Okay, so if the ID exists, then the user would be able to delete this endpoint, or sorry, delete the drink object. And upon successful operation, you should return this object, and in this object you are going to return the ID of the deleted object. Okay, so and if something goes wrong, then you should return with the respective status code. And the next thing, there is a region for error handling. So all the if any error occurs, if it's a 404 error, then you should implement the error handlers. I assume you have already done this in your previous projects, so I guess this is not going to be any worry for you. So if anything returns with a not found, like if the ID not exists, then you should use this error handler over here. So it makes your code a little bit reusable and more readable and more structured code. Okay, so and there is also an auth error handler. So if something related to authentication comes up, then you should use this error handling for the purpose for to handle those errors. Okay, so when you would be implementing all these things, then your application should look. So that would be the front end of your application. Okay. So like you have drawings, all these things, so partially filled, and there is a user page where you from where user can log in. So yeah, this is the front end of your application integrated with the back end of your application. So yeah, that's it. So take care. Bye.